This is the Comics Alternative, episode 260, a look at the January Previews catalog. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Comics Alternative. I'm Derek.
And I'm Gwen, and we're two people with PhDs talking about comics.
That's right. And on this week's episode, Gwen and I are going to be looking through the January Previews catalog. That's January 2018. But before we get to that conversation, we want to let all of you know that this episode of the Comics Alternative is brought to you by those wonderful folks at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to their website, dcbservice.com, for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. There, you're going to find all DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse titles at 40% off of the cover price if you pre-order. For all of the other publishers, you'll find that those discounts would be anywhere from 20 to 35% off of the cover price. And every single month, you're going to find some incredible specials. Sometimes those specials could be as much as 45% off of the cover price. Sometimes 50% off of the cover. But every now and again, you can find discounts that are even more impressive than that.
That is right, Derek. And I thought I'd feature some of the artists that we're going to be discussing today. All of First Second Science comics, which I love, I know you love, everyone should love,
yes,
are available for just $6.99. That includes fossils, dogs, dinosaurs, and surely in a little while, the newest volume that we'll be talking about later, robots and drones. And also we're going to be talking about the series Misfit City Volume 2, but Volume 1 is currently available for $9.74, which is 35% off the cover price. And actually, Derek, you can listen to Paul and me as we review this series on the December Young Reader Show. I think you had a chance to listen to that. So if you're interested in Misfit City, you can get a really great discount on that as well.
That's right. And in fact, as Gwen pointed out, the vast majority of the things that we're going to be highlighting on this episode are going to be at great discounts at Discount Comic Book Service, so definitely check them out. Go to dcbservice.com. They certainly will take care of all of your comics pre-ordering needs. And after you do get your titles there, please be sure to send them an email and tell them that Gwen and Derek sent you. Well, Gwen, Happy New Year.
Hey, Happy New Year to you too, Derek.
I know that, both of us have been going through some rough times with family over the past several months. But here's hoping that for 2018, things get a little smoother.
Absolutely. And, I was hanging out with, we both have new dogs.
Yes.
And, they're a lot of fun. And so I'm just sort of thinking about lots of good dog walking and hanging out in 2018.
That's right. Yeah. And also quite a bit of great comics talk.
That's right.
Well, speaking of comics talk, let's go ahead and get to the nitty-gritty of this week's episode, which is a look through the January 2018 Previews catalog. And many of these single issues that we're going to be highlighting will be coming out in, March. The books may be coming out later, but these are things to look forward to. And, as we point out many times during these preview shows, it's not as if Gwen and I are going to get every single thing that we mention, but we may get some of them, but we think that some of the other things are definitely worth mentioning. So I don't know about you, Gwen, but in terms of going through this month's catalog, I found myself highlighting and taking notes of more titles than I anticipated. So my list is rather long.
Yeah, so is mine. There were a lot of new series starting up that I'm really excited about. So it should be a lot of fun comics reading come spring.
Yeah. So, who knows? This may be an extra long episode where we talk about all the things that we want to highlight. And I think where I want to get started is before the solicits proper. In the January previews, they always announce the titles for Free Comic Book Day, which is, the first Saturday in May. Mm-hmm. And I'd like for us to look at some of these things that are coming out for Free Comic Book Day. Now, tell me, do you go to a local shop on Free Comic Book Day?
Sometimes. It depends, because I tend to go to Ann Arbor. Vault of Midnight is there, but they now have a new shop in Grand Rapids that I went to a couple months ago, and they have a great staff there, so I'm pretty much thinking that's where I might go this time around.
Well, are there any titles for Free Comic Book Day that really, really stand out to you, like must-haves?
Well, definitely Comics Friends Forever, because it's by Vera Broskell, who wrote Anya's Ghost, which is a really favorite, comic of mine. Mm-hmm. Comic Friends Forever is basically an anthology that celebrates kids' comics, girl power, and the amazing work of creators like Vera Broskell, Hope Larson, Charisse Miracle Harper, Ben Hatke, and Shanna Hale, and Nguyen Pham. So I definitely want to get a hold of that, especially I think Paul and I might want to mention that on our Young Readers show. So that was one of the things that sort of popped out to me that I definitely would like to get a hold of.
Yeah, I agree. And in fact, beginning on page 35 and then going on to, I guess, page 37, we have what's considered the gold sponsors of Free Comic Book Day. And of the gold sponsors, I'm with you there on that Comics Friends Forever coming out from First Second. I definitely want to get my hands on a copy of that. I also would like to get the Dark Horse Free Comic Book Day book under the gold sponsor. Not so much for the Overwatch, but for the Black Hammer stuff that's going to be in it. So that's something I'm looking forward to. Maybe even more so, the Image comic offering for the gold sponsorship. This is issue number 1 of Barrier. Now, have you read any of Barrier before?
No.
Okay, so this is by Brian K. Vaughan and Marcos Martin. And, they have their website where they do the digital comics, and Barrier, up until, I guess, now, had been just a digital comic. And in fact, in the past, we reviewed the first issue of Barrier on the podcast, but, the digital version.
Right.
And I guess since they're coming out with the first issue on Free Comic Book Day, that tells us that there's going to be a book version of this, maybe a hardbound. So, which is what Martin and Vaughn did with The Private Eye.
Right.
So I'm looking forward to that. I'm also looking forward to a number of silver sponsor titles. Abstract Studio, Strangers in Paradise #1. I definitely want to check that out. Something that I'm even more excited about than that is the Drawn In Quarterly offering, and that is Berlin #1. One of the things we'll discuss in this episode is the final issue of Berlin is being solicited. And I guess because they've wrapped everything up, they wanted to offer the very first issue of Berlin for Free Comic Book Day. And this is a series by Jason Lutz, and we can talk more about that later, but that'd be great to get this for Free Comic Book Day. And, of course, there's the Fantagraphics offering. Image has a silver sponsorship. Street Angels, Dog, One Shot.
I know, I saw that. You know me. If it's dogs or kids, I'm pretty much all over it. So
yeah. So I want to check that out. There's also Free Comic Book Day being offered for Ghost in the Shell. So any other Free Comic Book Day
Well,
offerings?
Actually, there's just one educational offering that I'm really excited about, and that's the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund.
Oh, yeah.
Has their Reading Without Walls handout, which I love. I mean, that's actually Gene Luen Yang's, was the title of his campaign when he was made National Youth Ambassador for young people's literature. And so it's basically a whole anthology of comics for, young kids, etc. And I'm actually going to try and maybe get my students to come with me and I'll get a copy of this so that we can talk about it in class. But yeah, I'm really excited about that.
There are a lot of great free comic book day offerings. And in fact, for our listeners who aren't able to get to a local shop that provides a lot of these titles for free comic book day, if you go and get your comics at Discount Comic Book Service, our sponsor, depending on how many you order, and I can't remember what month it is, it may be the March order, February order, I can't recall. But they do give you an option, depending on how much you order from them. Mm-hmm. The more you order, the more free comic book day issues you can get. And
cool.
So, that's a good way to get free comic book day copies that you may not be able to get in your local shop.
That's awesome.
Yep. Looking forward to free comic book day.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, so let's get to the solicits proper, I guess, and we start toward the beginning with Dark Horse. I have quite a number of things in Dark Horse, in fact. Where do you start?
Well, actually, you had marked American Gods, and I didn't mark it because I knew you would mark it, so I just figured why mark it, because Derek will definitely mark it. But, I'm just getting into American Gods right now, and so I'm excited about this because I need to read just about everything on it, because I think I'm going to be teaching a class on Neil Gaiman in fall of 2018. And so I was really excited to see this, and it will be like part of the large amount of reading that I'm going to have to do to get up to speed.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to teach a course on Neil Gaiman, I mean, that's a ton of stuff.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, but you're right. This is on page 56 of the catalog, and it's the #1 issue of American Gods. My Ainsel, I'm not sure how you pronounce that. Ainsel, yeah. Ainsel, and this is the second arc of the American Gods series. I read the first couple of issues of the first narrative arc. I wanted to wait for the trade to come out, which is going to be coming out soon, to read the rest of it. But I liked this. Now, have you seen the television show?
No, I will be.
Yeah, I haven't yet either, but I want to look at that. But so I'm probably going to check out this first issue of American Gods, My Ainsel. And again, that's on page 56. The next thing I have in Dark Horse is on page 58, so this actually follows up, or follows American Gods, My Ainsel, #1, and this is Dr. Star and the Kingdom of Lost Tomorrows. This is from the world of Black Hammer, so it's a #1 of 4, and I really like what Jeff Lemire is doing with Black Hammer. I'm a little behind in my Black Hammer reading, but I'm on board for about anything that Jeff Lemire does, in particular the Black Hammer. And I'm really glad to see that he is expanding this world. Also solicited, this is on page 60, is the trade of another World of Black Hammer narrative, and this is Sherlock Frankenstein and the Legion of Evil. So, if you like Lemire's Black Hammer, then you got a lot to look forward to in January for these solicits.
Yeah, and I love any kind of comic that gives you the backstory, right? So that was what attracted me a little bit to Dr. Star and the Kingdom of Lost Tomorrows. I really like that idea of learning a bit about the background. Plus, the illustrations are amazing. You've got that whole kind of she blinded me with science vibe going on there. So
science!
Yeah, science! Yeah, so anyway, everyone who's under, 30 is like, what the hell?
Yeah, why did Derek and Gwen just say science? What is that? Check out Thomas Dolby, our friends.
That's right.
After that, I go, because I think I know where you go next, but where I think you go, I have something before that. And on page 63 is the trade, actually it's a hardcover, it's the second volume of the Joe Gollum series, and this is Joe Gollum Occult Detective Volume 2, The Outer Dark. Now, do you know anything about Joe Gollum?
No. No.
Yeah, this Joe Gollum Occult Detective is, I believe it started off as a novel, and this is something that Mike Mignola and Christopher Golden created. And then about, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years ago, they started to come out with Joe Gollum Occult Detective Comics. And they had the first narrative arc, which I really enjoyed. Now we have the second, The Outer Dark, and so this is being solicited now. It's a hardcover. I mean, for those who don't know it, I'll read the solicit real quick. It says, Occult Detective Joe Gollum investigates 2 supernatural mysteries while demons from his past seep into the present. When men are being driven mad by otherworldly voices in their heads, Joe's search for an explanation leads to another dimension and a dangerous man who wants to harness its power. Then, Church leads Joe to a crumbling home where a young woman is being possessed by the ghosts of her family.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering, are the ghosts of her family green neon mice with, shiny yellow eyes, or is that...
Yeah.
Yeah, the cover's really exciting, so we'll have to see.
Yeah. And also they made available under the solicit it says also available Joe Gollum Occult Detective Volume 1, Ratcatcher and Sunken Dead.
Yeah, so there you go.
So there you go, yeah. I go probably where you go next, if I'm not mistaken.
All right, well, let's see if your Psychic Friends Network.
Well, you tell me, where do you go next?
Well, I was going to Milk and Cheese.
Yes. On
Dairy
page
products
68.
gone bad, yeah. Death to False Comics. I love this. Okay, this is Evan Dorkin, whom I love, and it says, a cartoon of hate, a wedge of spite, a comic book of idiotic genius. The Eisner Award-winning Dairy Duo returns in this trade paperback collection of every single stupid Milk and Cheese comic ever made from 1989 to 2010. So I'm really excited about this. I love stupid cheese comics. So yay!
Yeah, Milk and Cheese are one of my favorites, and we should mention that this is a trade paperback because I guess about 2 years ago, Dorkin came out through Dark Horse with a hardbound edition of this book. The complete Milk and Cheese. And so it's good to see that now they're going to be offering a trade paperback, which is going to be a little more affordable. So if you're not familiar with Milk and Cheese, we strongly recommend that you dip your toe into this. Get this trade. It is funny as hell. First and foremost, Evan Dorkin is just hilarious as a whole. I mean, not only his comics, but also talking with him. He's very entertaining. Milk and Cheese, though, is it's hard to explain. It's just really, really weird. It's
so 80s to me, and I just have to highly recommend it. I love it. And They Hate You, too. Oh, it's great. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. And it's only $19.99, which is much more affordable, and you
can get it for a good discount at Discount Comic Book Service.
That is so true.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I don't think as of this recording, I don't think they've put up the January specials, but definitely check back at dcbservice.com and you can see what they're offering this for.
And just so folks know, I mean, it's these two. It's literally a carton of milk and a slice of cheese, and they're just the most negative things ever. It's like Beavis and Butthead with dairy products
and anger. And anger issues, yeah. I love Milk and Cheese so much that I guess about a year ago I bought a 2-glass set of Milk and Cheese glasses.
Aww.
And on one there is an image of milk, and on the other one there's an image of cheese.
That is so cool.
And of course, both of them are doing various destructive things. So
cool.
I drink from them all the time.
I love that. They hate what you hate, and they hate you.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Evan Dorkin, on that nest page, 69, we have a trade paperback of Beasts of Burden Animal Rights. So now, do you like Dorkin and Jill Thompson's Beasts of Burden stories?
Yes. And
because they're dogs. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I love this color. I love this cover because there's one cat. It's all these awesome dogs kicking ass and this one little cat. So
yeah.
it's awesome.
Yeah, I really do enjoy this series. And when Gene and I interviewed Dorkin, not quite 2 years ago, we talked with him about his work on Beasts of Burden. And I know he's really proud of this. It's interesting in that Beast of Burden totally is completely different from Milk and Cheese and the Eltingville Club, some of the really hilarious, wacky, funny things that Evan Dorkin does. Beasts of Burden is a much more serious series. I think at times it is very touching and even heart-wrenching. And Jill Thompson's art is just fabulous.
I know. I just even the cover alone is just so, like, there's so much going on. Each animal has such a different, look on its face. And, okay, to be fair, they're standing over a bunch of corpses. So, but, but still, it's just, and I know that someone's going to lose their little canine life in this. So I'm getting ready to be sad. But anyway, I'm really looking forward to this. I love Evan Dorkin.
Yeah.
Just going to say it. So.
Yeah. Great guy.
Yeah.
Okay, I next go to page 73. Do you have anything before that?
Nope.
Okay, still in the Dark Horse section, and this is The Battles of Bridget Lee, Volume 2, The Miracle Child. This is by Ethan Young. And I'm interested in this because I read the first volume of The Battles of Bridget Lee, and God, who interviewed him with me? It may have been Paul. We had him, Ethan Young, on the Comics Alternative when this first volume came out, and we had a really nice conversation talking about the Bridget Lee series, and now we have the second volume that's about to come out.
Cool. No, it's really good.
Yeah. And they're also making available for order this first volume of Battles of Bridget Lee, Invasion of Farfall. And also another book of Ethan Young's, Nanjing, the Burning City.
Cool.
On that next page is something that, to me, and you tell me if this is correct, it looks like something that maybe you and Paul could discuss on the Young Readers Show. Yeah,
this is really interesting. Rocket Robinson and the Pharaoh's Fortune, Volume 1. And it's Sean O'Neill. And its tagline is, Indiana Jones as Tintin, set in 1933 Cairo, Egypt, which already is really pretty fascinating. I just finished writing an article on what I call the indigenous children in the Tintin series. All of the children, there were actually, interestingly, very few children in Hergé's Tintin, and the ones who are there are indigenous kids. And I've been writing about the way that those kids are portrayed, somewhat negatively, actually. And so, of course, I had a lot to say about that. So it's really interesting because in my article, I actually equated Tintin to Indiana Jones. And so I find it interesting. When I read this setup, I'm like, oh, wow, okay, well. But anyway, let me just read the write-up. It says, Cairo, 1933, the Egyptian capital is a buzzing hive of treasure hunters, thrill seekers, and adventurers. But to 12-year-old Ronald Rocket Robinson, it's just another sticker on his well-worn suitcase. The only son of an American diplomat, Rocket travels from city to city with his monkey Screech, never staying in one place long enough to call it home. But when Rocket finds a strange note written in Egyptian hieroglyphs, he stumbles into an adventure more incredible than anything he's ever dreamt of. Now, what I find really interesting is that this is tagged as historical fiction for middle-grade readers. Which is fascinating because actually this seems so unbelievably inauthentic to the time period, etc. So it will be interesting. I definitely am reading it. So, and Paul and I may really need to talk about this one, but it's definitely on my radar. So we'll see.
Yeah. Now, I hadn't heard of this before. Now, this is the first volume, and my guess is that this is not a narrative that was released in individual issues.
Right.
So I guess they're just coming out with trades or graphic novels, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
So, and the sample art that we have here does have a Tintin feel to it.
Oh, absolutely.
Or a Hergé feel to it, I guess.
Yep, absolutely. Total clear line. And, it should be fascinating to see what it's all about. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Do you have anything else in Dark Horse?
I don't, but I think you do.
Yeah, there are a couple more titles that I wanted to highlight. On page 76 is Mike Richardson and Tim Seeley's The Occultist Omnibus. And this collects The Occultist 1 through 5, and then the second volume of The Occultists At Death's Door 1 through 5. And, we've had Tim Seeley on the show, I don't know, maybe about 3 times for interviews, and we really do like his work. I remember marking The Occultist as something that I wanted to read, but I never got around to it. Now may be the opportunity. This is a trade paperback omnibus, and so I guess it's fairly affordable at $24.99. You can get a discount, I'm sure, at DCB Service. Yeah. So that's something that I may want to check out. And then finally, on page 81, I wanted to mention the next volume, number 6 in a series that I'm really enjoying, and this is Kengo Hanazawa's I Am a Hero. Best way of describing this is zombie manga, which is really interesting. Now, Shay and I discussed the very first issue or volume of I Am a Hero, a little over 2 years ago, and now we're up to volume 6. It's a great series. I look forward to each installment, and it is, the first volume. I hesitated calling it a zombie narrative because I thought it was going to be much more than a zombie story. Mm-hmm. But beginning with the second volume of the omnibus, it looked like it was turning into more of a zombie story. And that's what it's become. And I'm okay with that. It really is engaging. And if people aren't familiar with Hanazawa's I Am a Hero, then they should definitely check it out.
Yeah, and it says it's now a major motion picture, so, whoa.
Yeah. Big deal.
Hey.
Okay, so if we're done with Dark Horse, let's move on to the DC Vertigo section. And where do you start?
I start with Eternity Girl, number 1.
Yes, I do as well. So, yeah, what do you want to say about Eternity Girl?
Well, first of all, the art and the cover is by Sunny Liu, whom I adore. And it's written by...
And we interviewed.
Yeah, I know. And so I'm really excited about that. It's written by Magdalene Visaggio,
yeah.
Visaggio, and it says Carolyn Sharp has been a lot of things, including both a superhero and a super spy, which you'd think she'd be very tired by that point. But now, with those days behind her and her powers proving unreliable, Caroline finds herself stuck in a life weighted down by her depression and an inability to change. So see, this is a great way to start the new year. You see, Caroline is going to live forever, and there is no escape to be had. And I find this especially interesting because I'm doing work on this concept right now. I don't know if I'm sure you've read Tamaki's Super Mutant Magic Academy.
Yes.
Well, in the collection, the first comic is Everlasting Boy, and he shows up at various points in the narrative, and his angst is that he will live forever. And Tamaki explores the downside to that. And so when I saw this write-up, I was like, oh gosh, I absolutely have to read this too. So it's going on my list for sure, because I'm interested in writing on this premise of living forever. So yeah, I'm interested in this too. And this is a new title in Gerard Way's Young Animal imprint. So I'm looking forward to this. Also, I'm impressed that Magdalene Visaggio is doing the writing. I had the pleasure of talking with Visaggio at Heroes Con in 2016, I think it was. And cool. This is right when the first issue of Kim and Kim had just come out. So I talked with her about Kim and Kim, but it's good that now she's playing in the DC sandbox. Yeah, it sounds cool. And same for Sonny, too, who I'm really always happy to, whenever he's attached to anything, because he is such a great artist. So
he is, yeah. And you know, Sonny's done work for DC in the past, so this is great. But, you know, I think it's worth mentioning that on both pages 94 and 95, we get not only Eternity Girl, but three other new number ones from the Young Animal line. The others are Cave Carson Has an Interstellar Eye, number 1, Mother Panic Gotham AD, number 1, and Shade the Changing Woman, as opposed to the Changing Girl, number 1. I really do like what Way is doing with the Young Animal line. Now, on page 94, Gerard Way has a note here. He says, after last month's Milk Wars, Young Animal is back to bringing the weird with all your favorite characters going in drastically new directions not even they could expect. Find out what these characters are up to now and how they've hit their next level of evolution. Catch up with Cave and Team Carson as they fly out of the Earth and into outer space. Follow Mother Panic as she discovers a Gotham City without Batman. And meet Shade's new body, plus the introduction of our newest character and title, Eternity Girl. Now, I like the Young Animal imprint. What he was referring to in terms of Milk Wars, in the previous month, and so I guess this stuff will come out in February. Yeah, is the Milk Wars, and that is when we have a number of titles where the Young Animal characters interact with the DC universe. And I have to say, I was a little disappointed when they decided to do that. I mean, I'm a believer that it's okay for DC to keep worlds apart, and you don't have to bring everything into the DC universe. Let's say like they did with Hellblazer, John Constantine, and Swamp Thing, because those had been Vertigo titles. I have not really read Constantine titles or Hellblazer titles many of them, since they came into the DC universe. I keep them separate, and I was hoping that they would keep the Young Animals separate, but of course they have to do a crossover. So, but anyway, so these new titles are basically marking the post-Milk Wars world of Young Animals, and I'll probably check all of them out except for Mother Panic, because that wasn't one of my favorites.
Well, I'm just really excited. And it's nice, too, to see Cecil Castellucci is writing Shade the Changing Woman. I'm excited about that. I really like her work, too. So it's something to keep an eye on. Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Do you have anything else in DC Vertigo?
I do not.
Yeah, I have a couple more things, and these are in the Vertigo section. Let me get there. On page 153... we have Global Frequency Deluxe Edition. And this is something that it's written by Warren Ellis with art by Gary Leach, Glenn Fabry, Steve Dillon, Roy Martinez, John Muth, David Lloyd, Simon Bisley, Chris Sprouse, Carl Story, Lee Bememo, Tom Coker, Jason Pearson, and Gene Ha. So a lot of different artists here. It looks fascinating. I did not read Global Frequency when it originally came out. And so this is a good opportunity to really get to it. And this comes in a nice hardbound deluxe edition. Yeah.
April 4th. So.
Yeah. And I'm a fan of Warren Ellis, so that's cool. And then the other thing I wanted to mention in the Vertigo section is on page 159, and this is the trade of The American Way, Those Above and Those Below. Now, Kunka and I reviewed the very first issue of The American Way, Those Above and Those Below, when it first came out, and I really enjoyed it because I like the original American Way. Are you familiar with that series?
No.
Yeah, it's interesting. It is a superhero comic, but it's not part of the DC universe. In fact, the original American Way came out in 2006 through the Wildstorm imprint. Now we have another American Way story, and I didn't read past issue 1, waiting for the trade, and now the trade's about to come out.
So you are in good shape.
Yep. Okay, so if we're finished with DC Vertigo, let's move on to the next section of the catalog, which is IDW. Do you have anything in IDW? I
have a couple things in IDW. The first is on page 195, so I'm just kind of scrolling down there myself. And this is Four Sisters, And Volume 1, Enid, and it says, bereaved by the death of their parents, 5 sisters live in a seaside villa full of nooks and mystery, growing up together, sharing their grief, experiences, and love. The oldest becomes the head of the family. Book 1 is narrated by the youngest sister, Enid. And actually what interests me more than that write-up is the illustrations itself. The comic is written by Katie Bauer and Malika Ferjunk. I hope I'm saying her name right. The artist is Katie Bauer, and it just looks absolutely beautiful. It says it's adapted from a novel by Malika Ferjung. So it looks really exciting. It was nominated in Angoim for the Best Children's Graphic Novel Award, and it says each of the 4 books are narrated by a different sister. So it's a little bit along the lines of Little Women, I think. Also, it kind of reminds me a bit of a series that was popular in the mid-20th century called The 4-Story Mistake, which also is focalized through 4 siblings. So there's a lot of intertextuality for me with books that I teach or have read. So I'll be very interested to sort of see what this book is like and whether or not it's something that I might want to assign in a series class. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm right there with you in terms of this first volume of 4 Sisters, which is subtitled, I guess, Enid. It does sound like a fascinating concept. I would like to check this out. And, I think this is something, again, that you and Paul could discuss on the Young Readers Show.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. On that same page is another book that I think is worth checking out. And this is Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. And, of course, the Lewis Carroll narrative. But the artist on this volume is Jenny Frison. Jill Thompson, as we've mentioned earlier already, does the cover. There are a lot of Alice in Wonderland adaptations in comics.
A lot.
And this one looks like it's worth checking out. This collects both Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass.
Right.
Now I'm not familiar with Jenny Frison's work. Are you?
No.
Yeah, but they really play her up in this solicit. So I wanna take a look at this.
You want to check it out?
Yeah. I next go to that next page in IDW, and this actually there are 2 things worth mentioning here. Now, one is something that Edward and I have already discussed on the Comics Alternative Euro Comics episode, and this is Jean-Pierre Gebrat's The Reprieve.
Yeah.
And we had discussed Jean-Pierre Gebrat. I can't remember exactly when. I think it may have been summer of last year, summer or late spring. And it was The Flight of the Raven had come out from IDW as part of their Eurocomic series. But we also read the 2 volumes of The Reprieve that had been available in digital form from European comics. Now we have both of those volumes available, or soon to be available, in a print edition from IDW. Cool. So yeah, it's a great story, definitely worth checking out. And also on that page is A Strange and Beautiful Sound, and this is by Zepp. And I just recently read Zepp's The Story of Men, and in fact, Edward and I are going to discuss that on this month's Eurocomics episode. Zepp is an incredible artist. I wasn't familiar with him before The Story of Men. Now, A Strange and Beautiful Sound, this is the solicit. It says, William chose silence 25 years ago when he joined the Carthusian religious order. When an inheritance forces him to leave the monastery for Paris, he must master a whole new world and question certainties forged long ago. He meets Marie, a young woman whose days are numbered due to an incurable illness, and who has resolutely decided on making the most of the time she has left. Now William must face new questions. Where is life's value? In the struggles or in the peace? And complicate his choices in a powerful story that truly addresses the meaning of life. As I said, I wasn't familiar with Zepp before this book that came out later last year, The Story of Men. But from what I read in this solicit, A Strange and Beautiful Sound, and from having read The Story of Men, Zepp strikes me as someone who is right up my alley. I love realistic narratives. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like the genre stuff as well, the science fiction, fantasy, whatnot. But I'm particularly drawn to stories, comics, graphic novels, what have you, that deal with more realistic life issues. Or deals with life issues in a more realistic manner, right? Not fantastical or science fiction-y. And Zepp seems to be going in this direction with both The Story of Men and in the upcoming A Strange and Beautiful Sound.
Well, I love the solicit that says, for readers of quiet, introspective graphic novels. And it's like, that's me. Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to that, too.
Yeah. And they also mention, for readers who enjoyed books like 5,000 kilometers per second, and I think that's something that you and I reviewed on the podcast about a year and a half ago, right?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It looks like a really great comic.
Yeah. Where do you go after that in IDW?
I don't go anywhere after that.
Okay.
I think you have a couple more titles that you want to talk about, though.
Yeah, I do. On page 198 is a book that's fascinating, and in fact, I mentioned this to Craig Yo recently when I interviewed him for our Happy New Yo episode. And this is another Yo book. It's called Super Patriotic Heroes. These full-color comics stories from World War II tell of true role models of the patriotic ideal, starting with the Shield and followed by Captain America. A whole battalion of red, white, and blue heroes appeared on the four-color page to help fight the Nazis. Their fascinating history and their stirring tales will both entertain and inspire new generations. See the two-fisted, three-colored Miss America, the Fighting Yank, Super American, U.S. Jones, Captain Freedom, Lady Liberty, Major Victory, American Eagle, Captain Victory, and many more. And the thing that's fascinating by this is, about a little more than a year ago, Craig came out with his first volume of Super Weird Heroes, which is the very first thing that I think Yo Books did in terms of superheroes. And there's a lot of humor embedded in that first volume, and the second one's going to be coming out later this year, where he basically looks at superheroes that have weird abilities or who look strange or have unusual sidekicks and shticks. And so when Craig in Yo Books has dealt with superheroes, has been in a funny way. This is going to be more serious because this is going to be reprinting many of the, so to speak, red, white, and blue heroes that were out during the Second World War. And I asked Craig when I talked with him recently about this book, and he said that one of the reasons why he wanted to do this is because of the current political climate. We have a president who seems to harbor tendencies toward the more fascistic side of things.
Do you think? Yeah.
And so he said something like this is needed in these times. So, in so many words. So I'm definitely looking forward to Super Patriotic Heroes from Yo Books.
Cool.
And then I think the last thing that I have in IDW is on the following page, 199, and this is a top shelf book. It's called Ward's Valley.
Yeah, I saw that, the grumpy gnome.
Yeah, and again, this seems like something that maybe you and Paul could tackle for the Young Reader Show. It's Ward is a grumpy gnome who only wants to be left alone. He never asked for company, but when his beautiful forest starts filling up with animals, it's more than just grumpiness that makes him nervous. Mysterious trolls are on the loose, and Ward will need all the help he can get to defend Ward's Valley. And this is by Bobby Curnow, with art by Brenda Hickey.
He looks like he's got a raccoon sidekick, so it should be good.
And when I read this solicit, it reminded me of Shrek a little bit.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I love it. It says featuring beautifully drawn animals. Well, we like that.
That's right.
Yeah, darn it all. Cool.
Okay, so the image section.
Okay.
And, there are a few things in image that I've highlighted, and I guess the majority of them are number one issues. Most months you can count on image for 2, 3, 4, or even more number one issues of new series. And definitely this month does not disappoint.
I know. You wanted to talk about Gideon Falls, which looks great.
Yeah, Gideon Falls number one. The story is by Jeff Lemire, the aforementioned Jeff Lemire. The art is by Andrea Sorrentino. And it says, a brand new ongoing series from the acclaimed best-selling creative team of Old Man Logan and Green Arrow, the lives of a reclusive young man obsessed with a conspiracy in the city's trash and a washed-up Catholic priest arriving in a small town full of dark secrets become intertwined around the mysterious legend of the Black Barn, an otherworldly building that is alleged to have appeared in both the city and the small town throughout history, bringing death and madness in its wake. Rural mystery and urban horror collide in this character-driven meditation on obsession, mental illness, and faith.
Cool.
So obsession, mental illness, and faith. Is that like conflating all of those?
It's a light read there, Derek.
Yeah. But yeah, that does look fascinating. And, as I said earlier, I'm on board for about anything that Jeff Lemire does. So yeah. I'm definitely going to check this out and hopefully discuss it on an episode of the Comics Alternative.
Cool. Well, my interest is in the next one that is on the next page, actually, one on 206, Oblivion Song, which I think you noted, too, as being one that you wanted to check out.
Yeah.
Story by Robert Kirkman, and it says, a decade ago, 300,000 citizens of Philadelphia were suddenly lost in oblivion. The government made every attempt to recover them, but after many years, they gave up. Nathan Cole won't. He makes daily trips, risking his life to try and rescue those still living in the apocalyptic hellscape of oblivion. But maybe Nathan is looking for something else. Why can't he resist the siren call of the Oblivion Song? It sounds kind of interesting to me. So the cover art is gorgeous. The art's by Lorenzo Di Felici and Annalisa Leone. So I don't know. It just had sort of a fascinating look. I think in my notes I'd written, "Poor Philadelphia. It's always being destroyed." So I just sort of, I don't know. I was just sort of curious. The cover is gorgeous. So
it is, yeah. And, I like the stuff that Kirkman does. I mean, obviously there's The Walking Dead, and not everything he writes turns to gold, but I have high hopes for this one.
Yeah, well, the art is beautiful, and sometimes for me that makes up for some other things. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Okay, I next go to page 209. Do you have anything before that?
Nope, me too. 209. Yay.
Yeah. Dry Country, number one, and this is by Rich Tommaso.
Yes, our seal guy. I love this guy, Spy Seal. So
yeah, and it's interesting in that I know that he was hitting a stride there with Spy Seal, but apparently he's doing this story while he's taking a break from Spy Seal, which is interesting because when I interviewed Rich last year about Spy Seal, I don't think he mentioned this title, or if he did, it escapes my memory. But it says, Rich Tommaso is taking a short hiatus on Spy Seal and releasing a new crime series in the meantime, one set in the late 1980s of Miami that follows a young Generation Xer who plays amateur detective in order to find a missing lady he's recently fallen hard for. And Rich Tommaso does really good work when it comes to detective and spy stories. And so, you can check out his Dark Corridor as an earlier Image detective story. So now we have Dry Country, or County.
The other thing is the Art Deco cover is beautiful. He's so good at creating these period sort of architecture pieces, etc. So I can't wait to get this comic. So,
yeah, I think earlier I said Dry Country's the title. It's Dry County.
It's Dry County, yeah.
Yeah.
So this should be cool.
Yeah. On that next page is another number one, a number one of a 5-issue limited series, and this is Infidel. Story is by Pornsak Pichetshoot, and I probably butchered that name, with art by Aaron Campbell and Jose Villaruba. A haunted house story for the 21st century, Infidel follows an American Muslim woman and her multiracial neighbors who move into a building haunted by entities that feed off of xenophobia. That's intriguing. That definitely is worth checking out.
Yeah, that one looks really dark and interesting. So
yeah, now I'm not familiar with the work of Pichetchote, and again, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that last name correctly. It's Pichettshote, but I do like the solicit, so it's captured my attention.
Yeah, me too.
Same thing with the number one issue on that next page on 211, and this is Prism Stalker number 1. With story and art by Sloan Long. For fans of Octavia Butler, Sailor Moon, and the biopunk horror of David Cronenberg comes Prison Stalker, an ongoing sci-fi adventure series by Sloan Long. Vep is a young refugee raised away from her devastated home planet as an indentured citizen in a foreign colony. She works tirelessly for her insectoid hosts, and there is no exit in sight for her for this vicious, dripping city nest. The eye of opportunity is closing. Her duty is to her family and her siblings, but what more can she do for them here? The answer appears faster than she is ready for. And the cover looks great.
Yeah.
Very colorful. So
I wish they'd showed some of the insects, though. But
yeah. I wonder what those insectoid characters are like. And then the only other thing I have in Image is a series of trades. They've come out with a lot of trades of some of their series from the past several months. And these begin on page 216. There's a whole slew of them.
Right.
Coyotes, Family Value, Gasolina, Port of Earth, The Realm, Retcon, so on and so forth.
Yeah. So lots of catching up.
Yeah. So I guess then we go to what some people call the back half of the catalog, and this is smaller publishers after the premier publishers that we've just mentioned. And I first go, and I need to get there now, to page 262.
Yeah, that's where I am too. I love this. This is cool.
Okay, what did you want to mention on page 262?
Bizarre Romance. But just a second, because I have to get there. It takes forever to scroll through this. Okay. Yeah, Bizarre Romance. Audrey Niffenegger. Eddie Campbell is the artist. Internationally best-selling author Audrey Niffenegger. She wrote The Time Traveler's Wife, which many people may have read or heard of. And graphic artist Eddie Campbell collaborated on a wonderfully bizarre collection that celebrates and satirizes love of all kinds. With 16 different stories told through illustrated prose and comic panels, the couple explores the idiosyncratic nature of relationships, etc. And this looks sort of fascinating to me. The cover is awesome. And it's a picture of I think a cat in a tuxedo hugging a life-size bird.
Yeah.
In a dress. So it really looks fascinating. So, and hey, close to Valentine's Day. So
yeah,
I'm looking forward to that. And that's out of Abrams ComicArts. So
yeah, I'm not familiar with Audrey Niffenegger, but I do love Eddie Campbell's work, and he does the art here.
The Time Traveler's Wife made a big splash when it came out, so that she's probably actually known more to the literary set. But I'm really looking forward to this. It looks like an interesting comic.
Mm-hmm. Also on that same page is a book that I'm really glad to see coming out, and this is the Motor Girl Omnibus. For those who are fans of Terry Moore, you know that he just recently wrapped up Motor Girl, and now we have the entire Motor Girl collection.
Cool.
That's going to be coming out. And, at a good price. So you can choose to get the soft cover at $27.99 or the hardcover at $39.99. But again, you can find, discounts at DCB Service.
Absolutely.
And the second issue of Strangers in Paradise 25 is going to be coming out. That's solicited as well. Mm-hmm. Where do you go next, my friend?
Well, I think that you are... I go all the way down to Boom Studios, so I think you might have a few things before that.
Yeah. One thing that seems interesting is on page 270, and this is in the Aftershock section. Mm-hmm. Aftershock's been doing a lot over the past year and a half. It seems like about every month or maybe even every other month, they're coming out with the beginning of a new series or a new narrative arc in an already existing series. But this is the first time I think that they've done an anthology. This is called Shock Anthology. And it says, Aftershock Comics continues to push boundaries by presenting its very first anthology collection featuring a slew of today's top writers and artists, presented in the European album format. This handsome hardcover features the creative talents of Neil Gaiman, Michael Zulli, Charles Vess, Michael Gaydos, Andy Clark, Andrew Robinson, Mike Carey, Jim Starlin, Phil Hoster, Paul Jenkins, and of course the list goes on. I'm not going to go through all of this, but let's just say it's a who's who of the comics world. This is impressive. It's an anthology. It is hardbound, and it's in European album format,
which is awesome.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's nice to see more and more publishers moving that way, actually. So
definitely. After that, I go to page 289, and this is in the Archie section. It's not often that I mention or highlight the Archie titles in our preview show, but this one seems worth mentioning. It is Vampironica #1, and I mention this because I guess this is part of what Archie's doing in terms of its horror titles. There's Afterlife with Archie, and there's Sabrina. So now we have this new title, Vampironica. When Veronica is bitten by a century-old vampire, her thirst for blood threatens to turn Riverdale into a haven for the undead. Will she put an end to the vampire threat or give in to her bloodlust?
Da, da, da.
Yeah. Now, have you been watching the Riverdale series on CW?
No, I have not. But every single human being I know has been. So I'm on the outside. But apparently it's really good. So
yeah, that's what I've heard. And it's on my to-watch list. I just haven't watched it yet.
Yeah. It's interesting because I'm actually right now working on a section of this book on Archie Comics, and I have a good friend, Kate Slater, who's a professor at Rowan University who writes on the horror comics, Archie's horror comics. So I know she'll be excited about this. So Kate, if you're listening, actually I did read through a couple volumes of Jughead just because Jughead, it's always been kind of an interesting character to me. So yeah, there's a lot going on in the Archie world right now.
Yeah. Now, is this part of your Bloomsbury book?
Yep.
Good.
Yeah, because I'm really interested in, I worked through Peanuts, which is like a quintessential comic strip for kids, but it really is very dual audience. And it's interesting because until maybe, 5 or 6 years ago, I don't think most adults ever had any interest whatsoever in Archie. There was no crossover appeal, I think, whatsoever. People might read it for nostalgic reasons, but that was it. I remember when they had the comics that featured Barack Obama, I was really interested and I bought those. But for the most part, I hadn't dipped back into the Archie comics world since I was probably a teenager. But with this, with their horror comics, that has changed. Mm-hmm. And now, almost everyone I know has either watched Riverdale, read the horror comics. So it's interesting to see how this extremely long-running series has managed to reinvent itself yet again in 2 different ways and in really popular ways. So
yeah. Okay, so where do you go next?
I go next to Boom Studios on 312, so I don't know if there's...
Oh, okay.
I thought some things before that.
Well, yeah, actually, one thing before that, I thought that maybe you would have highlighted this, and this is on page 302, and this is in the Avery Hill Publishing section, Tilly Walden's I Love This Part. Now, what I found curious, Gwen, about this solicit is that a little over a year and a half ago, I Love This Part was published, but as a softcover edition. And so now we have this solicit for a hardbound edition of I Love This Part, which is kind of the inverse of what publishers do, right? Usually they come out with a hardbound edition and then about a year or so later come out with a softcover edition. But here, Avery Hill apparently is doing the inverse. I Love This Part, and Tilly Walden is... she's a significant creator. I was about to say she's an up-and-coming writer, but, in many ways she's already arrived, as young as she is, because she's come out with a good number of books over the past 2 or 3 years. And last year she had her first non-Avery Hill publication, the first second book, Spinning, that Paul and I discussed on Comics Alternative episode. Right,
and I have a feeling that probably Avery Hill wanted to capitalize on the fact that so many more people know her now. And it looks like the cover is gorgeous. And so I think the aesthetics of this will be really great. So, I'm really happy for Tilly.
Right, yeah.
And I think you and I talked about this series in depth when we did our Avery Hill show. So
yeah, was it the Avery Hill show?
Yeah,
or
it was.
Was it when you and I were discussing the?
It might have been the Ignatz Awards too. I think it was both, actually. I think we talked about her in both. So that's why when I saw this, it was sort of like, hey, wait a minute, haven't we already talked about that? So yeah, it is kind of cool that they've chosen a hardcover.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that they may be doing this now to kind of capitalize on her exposure, which is wider, because Avery Hill is not a publisher that I think many American readers know. It's based in the UK. They don't have the kind of distribution that some non-US publications have. Right. But it's definitely worth checking out. Tilly Walden does great stuff, and I Love This Part is worth getting.
Absolutely.
So you say you go next to the Boom Studio section.
I go to Boom. And the first thing I'm really interested in, their featured item is Lucy Dreaming #1. It's 1 of 5, written by Max Bemis, illustrated by Michael Dianelis?
Yeah, that sounds right to me.
Okay. Yeah, because I said it 2 different ways. One way has to be right? But at any rate... this is a sweeping coming-of-age fantasy about living your dreams, literally. And it says, in her dreams, Lucy is the hero of all of her favorite stories, living each night as a grand adventure. These journeys will teach her more about herself and the real world around her than she ever expected. And it just sort of looks like a cool sort of coming-of-age type narrative. And so I thought that would be sort of neat. So that was my first one.
Yeah. I agree. That looks interesting. And again, it struck me as something that you and Paul could discuss on the Young Reader Show.
Absolutely.
And in fact, on the next page is something else that I thought about in terms of you guys.
Yeah.
And this is a clever title, Dodge City, issue #1 of 4. Now, this has nothing to do with Westerns, though. But it has everything to do with dodgeball.
Yeah.
This is written by Josh Trujillo with art by Kara McGee. And you have 15-year-old Tomas is the newest member of the Jazz Pandas dodgeball team. And he's got a certain knack for keeping an eye on the ball, or several. However, he is new, untested, and still not cutie.
Oh, not cutie? No, he's not a cutie.
No, quite. I'm sorry, I misread. And still not quite part of the team. But if the Jazz Pandas, and I like that name, want to make it to the summer regional championships, they'll have to pull together and learn to work as a team.
It's sort of like Roller Girl, only with dodgeball, is what I was thinking of. Yeah, it looks like a good book. So, yeah. And then I go over to the next page. There's a couple of other really interesting ones. Nuclear Winter, Volume 1. I know we shouldn't laugh over nuclear winter. Probably this is what we'll be living in the next couple months. But it's written by Karen Briot, and it's the cover is great. It's these 2 kids on this snowmobile that's coming right towards you, with it looks like their sidekick. Anyway, it's set in Montreal, and it's been 9 years since an accident in a nuclear power plant plunged Montreal into an eternal winter. The city is now blanketed 365 days a year in radioactive snow. And basically it's about these kids and their eclectic urban wildlife stuff. I mean, I don't know, it just looks kind of wild, and the cover is funny. So I thought that might be an interesting one for Paul and me to talk about. Yeah,
that does look interesting. But there's another one on that page as well I think you wanted to mention.
Yeah, Dodo. And it's by Philippe Nunez. When Layla's parents split up, she doesn't understand why her life has changed and why her dad never comes by anymore. Lonely and confused, she ends up befriending a strange bird that lives in the park by her house. And her friendship with this bird, a dodo named Ralph, takes Layla on a journey she never expected and shows her things about her own world she had never noticed before. And the cover is just hysterical.
Yeah, Nunez's art looks good, really good.
Yeah, it does. It definitely has a very French feel to it. Definitely band dessiné look to it. But that should be really fascinating. Mm-hmm. And then I think we both go over to page 316.
Yes.
Yeah, do you want to talk about this next one?
Yeah, this is another original graphic novel, Persephone. And this is written and illustrated by, and I'll try to pronounce this name correctly.
I left that to you. That's why I said, hey, Derek.
Oh, that's why you wanted me to, okay. Locatelli Kornowski. And I'm sure
we are so sorry.
Yes, we are so sorry. French author, whom I just pronounced or tried to, presents a modern-day retelling of the Greek myth of Demeter and her daughter Persephone in an exciting universe that blends high fantasy adventure and visuals reminiscent of Japanese anime and 1950s American-style comics.
There's a panda in it. What is the thing about pandas? This is jazz pandas, panda pandas.
This is the January previews catalog is the panda episode issue.
That's right, the panda issue. That's cool, actually. I'm fine with that. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, this looks like a really interesting comic, and the cover is fascinating. So, definitely want to take a look at this.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with his work, but I'd like to check that out.
And then I was really interested over on page 322. And I don't know if I'm skipping ahead of anything you are interested in. But this is the second collected volume of Misfit City, which Paul and I reviewed last month. And I'm really interested to see where this goes out. So this is an advance solicit for the May 2018 release. And basically this is a Goonies type. If you ever watched Goonies, the movie Goonies, this is about a town in the Pacific Northwest where a movie like Goonies has been made, and now there's a huge tourist trade involved in it, and this group of friends gets involved in a mystery that is sort of along the lines of Scooby-Doo. In fact, there's a lot of, I think, Scooby-Doo intertextuality. Anyway, this is written by Kirsten Kiwi Smith and Kurt Lustgarten. It's illustrated beautifully by Naomi Franquise, who is, I think we mentioned, did we mention that she's also, or we're going to mention, that she's the cover artist for that Puerto Rico benefit comic, the anthology that's coming out. So she's really getting a lot of exposure lately. But anyway, I'm interested in continuing to read this series, and you can hear Paul and I talk about it in the December Young Readers Show. So I was excited about that.
Yeah. You've mentioned your and Paul's last Young Readers episode, and our listeners can find that. That came out last week. So go to comicsalternative.com and check that out, because that's a really good episode. Not only do you guys discuss Misfit City, and what else was the new title? Oh Lordy, I can't remember. Isn't that terrible? But you also highlighted many of the children's and young adult comics
from 2017. Yeah, that
exactly.
We really liked. So I'm sorry, I put something in the can, I tick it off, and I keep going, Derek. So. But Misfit Cities was the main comic that we talked about. Oh yeah, we talked about Goodnight Planet
and the Dam Keeper.
The Dam Keeper. You're right. Okay, so we spent a lot of time on Misfit City, and it's an interesting comic, definitely worth checking out. So
yes. you have anything else in Boom?
I do not.
I go next to the Cinebook section, and in particular pages 332 and 333. Do you have anything before that?
No.
Okay. And, most of these, I guess, are series that are currently ongoing, but I just want to mention this. Cinebook is another UK publisher. We were mentioning one earlier. I really do enjoy Fabian Vellman and Bruno Gazzotti's Alone series, and basically this is a series where it's based around children, and they wake up one day, so to speak, and realize that their parents are gone.
Right.
It's really engaging, and in fact, Edward and I talked about the Alone series several months back on the Eurocomics episode, or on a Eurocomics episode. Now we have the 8th volume of Alone coming out, The Arena, and this solicit is on page 332. But on that next page is a couple of other things that I'd like to mention. There is the 22nd volume of Valerian and Laureline, Memories from the Futures. And again, this is something that Edward and I discussed. In fact, last summer, when the Valerian movie came out, we discussed a variety of volumes of Valerian and Laureline. And that's a really good sci-fi series. It's a classic. And then a series that I'm not familiar with, I haven't read the first volume, but the second volume is being solicited here. It's Trent, Volume 2, The Kid. Trent is a Western, and I like Westerns. I'm particularly interested in European Westerns because I always find it interesting how Europeans contextualize, visualize, and present the American West.
Right.
And many times I think it's better than American writers represent the West. Yeah. So I'm fascinated by that.
Well, this is interesting too because it's the Mountie. I love this. It says it's a sensitive young man that the Mountie finds, a free spirit with a deep love of French poetry. So this should be quite. This isn't your grandma's Western. So
that's right.
Yeah.
Okay. After that, I go to page 346. Do you have anything before that?
I do. On page 334, Conundrum Press is putting out a series called, or actually an anthology called BDQ, Essays and Interviews on Quebec Comics. And it's basically, it says the comics community in Quebec has long been heralded as unique, blending the clear line aesthetic of Europe with the underground influence of North America. Think 1010 meets Robert Crumb. This volume is a companion to the Bidang imprint to give critical context to the history and breadth of the works. So if you're interested in Canadian comics, most specifically French Canadian comics, I think this would be a really great volume to have. And maybe even with that companion set that they mention. So I guess we're just keeping the Canadian theme going. But I would really like to get this, so I probably will. I really am interested in French Canadian comics, so I was excited.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I recently got a copy of this.
Oh, great.
Andy and I did a publisher spotlight on Conundrum back in November.
Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
And we didn't get this collection in time to include in our discussion, but it is, as I think the solicit may mention, it's not just comics, but it's also essays and reviews and whatnot. So it's kind of a hodgepodge of a variety of different things, but it does give you a sense of the kind of things that are coming out from the Quebecois.
Oui.
Okay. You have anything else before 346?
Nope.
Okay. This is in the Dynamite section, and this is the Green Hornet 66 Meets the Spirit trade paperback. Written by Fred Van Lente with art by Ty Templeton. I remember highlighting these issues, the Green Hornet 66 Meets the Spirit, when they came out, but I never got around to reading them. Now would be an opportunity to read everything all at once because this trade collects all 5 issues of the series. And it was not last year, but I think the year before, that for Will Eisner Week, Andy Kunka and I did an episode where we looked at Spirit Comics post Will Eisner, so how other people have represented and dealt with the Spirit. And I remember one of the things that we noted was when it comes to team-ups, for instance, like the Spirit and the Rocketeer or the Spirit and Batman, I don't know, sometimes they're okay, sometimes they're not. And so I'm kind of lukewarm on Spirit team-ups. Who knows? Maybe this is good. If our listeners have any experience with the Green Hornet 66 Meet the Spirit, let me know if this is worth getting. I'm a big fan of the Spirit, and I'm probably going to get this regardless. But I haven't read any of the issues yet.
Cool.
After that, I go to the Drawn and Quarterly section on page 353. Do you have anything before that?
No, I don't.
Okay. Now, this is something that I alluded to earlier, and this is a big deal. This is the final issue of Jason Lute's Berlin, issue number 22. Have you read any of Berlin?
I read, a friend had a copy, I can't remember which issue it was, and I was looking through it, and it's beautiful. So I thought I'd wait and just read it when it all came out. So this is the last issue. So have you been reading it from the very beginning?
I have read it from the beginning, but I've fallen way, way, way behind. You can find, and I guess they're still in print, there are 2 trade collections of Berlin, Volume 1 and Volume 2. I don't think there's been anything collected since Volume 2, and I could be wrong there, but I'm pretty sure there hasn't been. But the individual issues of Berlin have been coming out, sometimes sporadically. So you can get one and then maybe wait 6 or 8 months until another one. But lately, Lutz has been coming out with, I guess, the latter issues of Berlin on a fairly regular basis. And so now with issue number 22, he's wrapping up things. And it's good to see that this is ending, because that means that pretty soon they're going to be collecting at least, if not the rest of the series. I mean, who knows? They could collect everything in an omnibus,
right.
Which would be really nice to have.
Mm-hmm.
But I enjoy Jason Lute's work, and Berlin in particular is something worth checking out.
Cool.
On that next page are a couple of other new titles coming out from Drawn and Quarterly. One is from John Porcellino, whom I really enjoy, and this is From Lone Mountain. It says, the solicit reads, John Porcellino makes his love of home and of nature the anchors of this increasingly turbulent world. He slows down and visits the forest, fields, streams, and overgrown abandoned lots that surround every city. He studies the flora and fauna around us. He looks at the overlooked. Porcellino also digs deep into a quintessential American endeavor, the road trip. Uprooting his comfortable life several times in From Lone Mountain, John drives through the country, weaving from small town to small town, experiencing America in slow motion, avoiding the sameness of airports and overwhelming hustle of major cities. Grand themes of King Cat are visited and stated more eloquently than ever before. Serendipity, memory, and the quest for meaning in the everyday. So that's a substantive solicit.
Yeah.
Do you read Porcellino, in particular King Cat?
No, I haven't, actually.
Really good stuff. And, to me, John Porcellino is kind of the king of the indie self-published creators. Mm-hmm. But, he has had collections and books coming out from Drawn and Quarterly. And, this is his new one. So I definitely want to check this out. And then the solicit under that is called Von Spatz, and this is by Anna Hayfish. I've heard of Anna Hayfish, but I don't think I've ever read anything of hers. And this solicit really captured my attention. It says, Walt Disney is exhausted, both physically and mentally. After a breakdown where he trashes his office, his wife Liana brings him to a retreat to recover, the Von Spatz Rehabilitation Center. with a campus that includes studio buildings, a gallery and art supply store, a hot dog booth, and a penguin pool. It's not a panda pool, but a penguin pool. The clinic is a paradise for artists in crisis. There, Disney meets Tommy Ungerer and Saul Steinberg, and together they embark on a regimen of relaxation and art therapy. Hayfish looks at the fervent drive and crippling insecurities of the average artist and places those same issues on the shoulders of three celebrated 20th century artists. Part study of isolation, part tale of begrudging camaraderie, daily life at the center mixes with remnants from the world outside.
Yeah, that's fascinating, actually.
So if you're a fan of Walt Disney, it's worth checking out.
Well, my mom and dad met at a place called the Institute of Living, where my mom was a nurse and my father was working as an orderly while he was going to grad school. And this was in Hartford, Connecticut. And a lot of famous people were my parents' patients. And in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, a lot of these types of sort of the precursor to what we now consider the sort of rehab that Lindsay Lohan goes to, right? But this was a very different kind of sort of secret world where these celebrities would be sort of ferreted in, helped out, and then go out the other side. And so I think my mom would find this to be a really interesting title, actually, so I may have to get this for her.
Yeah.
So...
And also, you can't go wrong with Drawn and Quarterly, at least in my book.
Nope, you sure can't.
Okay, I go next to one of my favorite sections of every month's catalog, and that is the Fantagraphics book section of previews.
Right.
Do you have anything before that?
No, I don't. I have something on that, so...
Yeah, and this is on page 362. This is where their new releases are. Okay, so what from Fantagraphics are you particularly interested in?
Nicole Hollander's We Ate Wonder Bread just sounds as fascinating as possible. It says it's a veteran cartoon, Nicole Hollander, who's done Sylvia, which, is a comic I've read for years. First graphic novel, a coming-of-age story set in Chicago starring the gangsters, the bedbugs, the Catholic girls, the police, the jukebox, the fortune teller, and the family's Blue Hudson. Not only does this illustrated memoir give insight into how Hollander developed her style and wit, it's also a chronicle of a Chicago community that has since disappeared into an expressway. And I don't know, this is interesting to me on a number of levels, so I'm really super excited to read this.
Yeah, that looked interesting. I had marked this one as well, but I have to say I'm not familiar with Nicole Hollander's work. You say you are?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sylvia is a pretty well-known daily comic, and so, yeah, I'll be very interested to see this. I'm not sure what generation she is. I suppose I could Google her because this is the 21st century, and there should be no question that goes unanswered. But she was born 1939. Yeah, I figured she was about my mom's age. It was a daily usually one panel strip that was, but sometimes multiple panels, very sarcastic sort of discussion of being a woman, especially a middle-aged woman in America. So I'm super interested in seeing this. Yeah.
Also on that page in the Fantagraphics section, there are other titles there that I'm definitely going to get. First and foremost is one of my favorites, Love and Rockets. This is the fourth volume, issue number 5. And so I definitely have to keep up with Love and Rockets. Along with that is a book by Dave Cooper, Mudbite. And, it's not often that we get anything from Dave Cooper. Several years ago, he had that series Weasel. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is really good. And apparently, this compiles, Mudbite, it says it compiles 2 all-new Eddie Table stories. So I'm interested in this one. Also, there is a new book by, do you pronounce it Gipi or Gipi?
I don't know.
I think he's an Italian cartoonist, and 2 of his books, at least 2, have come out from First Second several years ago. Now, though, this book, Land of the Suns, is coming out from Fantagraphics. Land of the Suns is Gipi's most artistically accomplished work to date, juxtaposing the stark savagery of the post-apocalyptic narrative with the Italian master's dense and expressive line work. While similar tonality, Sons, unlike Lord of the Flies, lays the groundwork for humanity overcoming sheer brutality and personal desires, while commenting on the fragile state of masculinity and human nature itself.
Cool.
Yeah. And then also on that page is issue number 8 of Real Deal by Lawrence Raw Dog Hubbard and William Master of Chaos Clausen. I've read a few issues of Real Deal, and I enjoy it.
Yeah, that should be fun.
Yeah. So where do you go after
I go
Fantagraphics?
Next to first, second books, starting on page 364. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of comics on this page that I'm super interested in. One of the ones that I mentioned is Brazen. And this is by Penelope Bajou. She's celebrated cartoonist, tells the true stories of daring women throughout history. With her characteristic wit and dazzling drawings, she profiles the lives of formidable female role models, some world famous, some little known, from Nellie Bly to Mae Jameson or Josephine Baker to Narcisse Alabid. Their stories are sure to inspire the next generation of ladies. And it's just looks like a fun book, like to get for the girls in my life or whatever. It looks like an interesting book. So that was the first one that I noticed. What about you?
Well, I want to say a couple things about this book. Okay. I've read, and I can't remember where, but one of the stories that's going to be included in Brazen. I really do like Bajou's work. In fact, we have talked about Bajou on the Comics Alternative in the past. At some point, I guess it was back in 2015, we reviewed her book Exquisite Corpse, which came out from First, Second. Yeah. And I think this is another First, Second book. Edward and I last year discussed her book about Mama Cass, California Dreaming, Cass Elliot Before the Mamas and the Papas.
Right.
Wonderful book. And so now we get this collection of stories of women rebels, so to speak. So, Bajou is definitely someone worth checking out.
And, this follows a trend, too, in children's lit. There's a lot of books that have come out in the last 2 or 3 years on radical women in history and picture books and bedtime stories for radical girls. So this sort of falls into line with that. So, yeah.
You asked me about some of the first, second books that I'm interested in addition to Brazen, titles that I'm sure that you wanted to highlight as well. Science Comics, Robots and Drones, and then Volume 5 of Secret Coders. Yep,
absolutely. Can't wait to read Robots and Drones. This is by Margaret Scott and Jacob Chabot. Or Shabbat, I'm not sure how he says it, if he says it as if he's an American or not. But this is the most recent in a series of just amazing books out of Science Comics, and I can't wait to read it. I like robots, I like drones. So Robots and Drones together. The cover is great, too. It's got a huge robot and some drones flying over its head, and so it just looks pretty exciting. And it says it's an action-packed nonfiction graphic novel for middle grade readers. And so it talks about everything from, basically coin-powered water fountains to the very oldest robots, everyday essentials like the coffee maker in the car. And Derek, when we talked about dogs, we learned so much about genetics. And I'm thinking that in this, I might actually understand how the coffee maker works, which is great. So, you're always learning something with Science Comics.
Yeah, you're right. When we interviewed Andy Hirsch, we talked about how, obviously we learned about dogs, canines, but there's a lot about just genetic science as a whole that's embedded in that narrative. So, And then there's Secret Coders, and I know that you're a big fan of Genuine Yang's and Mike Holmes' Secret Coders.
I am, although it's getting a little difficult for me without my new math skills. So I may have to sit down with like a 10-year-old to go through this volume. But yeah, we're up to volume 5. And I have to tell you, volume 1 was a snap. Volume 2 was a bit challenging. Volume 3, and I'm like, damn, I do not have a PhD in physics. Help me, Jean Lewin Yang. But anyway, all joking aside, these are great books that, by the way, a lot of math and science teachers are using in the classroom. And they're really funny and well drawn. And Mike Holmes is really a hoot as well. So it's just a great series, and it's exciting to see that it's had so much success.
Mm-hmm. Also in the second section of the catalog, and I'm looking back on page 364, there's a lot of first-second offerings.
First-second rocks. There's actually 2 more on that page that we wanted to talk about. So
yeah, that's what I wanted to mention. Yeah, there's Sarah Varon's New Shoes. Mm-hmm. And then also the 3rd volume of Jorge Aguirre and Rafael Rosado's Chronicles of Claudette, Volume 3, Monsters Beware. Now, have you been reading the Chronicles of Claudette series?
I have not, so okay. I am remiss.
Yeah, I know of them, but I haven't been reading them, so I was hoping that you could tell me something about them.
I can tell you nothing, but it looks fun.
Yeah. It does.
Actually, I was going to mention the graphic novel Venice by Hiro Taniguchi.
Right, that's in the fanfare Ponent Mall section.
Right, and that just looks beautiful. It says he discovers a beautifully lacquered box which contains what appears to be old photos and hand-drawn postcards of Venice. One photo of the Piazza San Marco catches his eye. It is of a Japanese couple feeding a multitude of pigeons in the square, dressed in what looks like 1930s-style clothes. Who were they? What relevance did they have for his mother? And armed with the contents of the box, he travels to Venice to track down the places and events displayed in the images, etc. It looks like a gorgeous, gorgeous read. So I'm excited about that too.
Yeah, I'm not sure when, but I think that this has come out in the past, this volume by Taniguchi, right. Jiro Taniguchi, Venice. And it's something that I haven't read, but I'm interested in. Now, Shay and I have discussed Taniguchi in the past on the manga show when the Distant Neighborhood Complete volume came out. We reviewed that. But at some point, I'd like to get to Venice.
Me too.
Both literally and also in this
the book. Yeah.
After first, second, I go to page 368.
Okay.
Because there's something here that... Okay, now I am going to be admitting to something I'm rather ashamed of.
Uh-oh.
Outside of a few stories here and there, I have never read Raina Telgemeier, or at least a book. Mm-hmm. I've been meaning to read, Smile Sisters, her other works, but I haven't. But now we have the Raina Telgemeier collection box set, which includes, Drama, Sisters, Smile, and then the most recent one. That's called
Ghosts.
what?
Ghosts.
Ghosts. That's right. Yeah. So I guess this would be a way to catch up on Raina Telgemeier. And the reason I say I'm ashamed, she's such a big name and such a big seller, and everybody seems to know Raina Telgemeier. But outside, like I said, outside of 2 or 3 stories that I've read collected here and there, I have not read one of her complete books.
Well, there's a lot of scholarship out on her now. A good friend of mine, Michelle Abate, who co-edited the graphic novels for children and young adults with me, she has a wonderful article out now on drama and some of the somewhat problematic aspects of that text. So, it's really interesting because Telgemeier's popularity is just unbelievable. It's through the charts. She's single-handedly responsible in some ways for the financial, success of many, obviously of graphics, but of of, she has carried along with her a lot of other comics creators, but her work is not without some problems. And Ghosts has some cultural insensitivity. Drama also has some cultural insensitivity. It's like when she moves beyond her own life and her own experiences, she can sometimes wander into some areas where there's been some legitimate criticism of her work. So I'd encourage you to read it, just because she's obviously extremely talented and obviously extremely popular, but her work is, in my opinion, somewhat uneven. And so, I mean, it's nice to see that she's helped so much with the visibility of children's comics, but that doesn't mean that her work shouldn't be carefully read and analyzed. And a lot of that is happening now as well. So if you're interested in the scholarship that's surrounding Telgemeier, getting the box set would help you work through that and, be able to really enjoy the great scholarship that's being written about it.
Yeah, I remember when on the Young Readers series, you guys reviewed Ghosts. Right. You had a follow-up discussion, I think that next month, where you did talk about some of the problematic issues surrounding that and what some other critics had pointed out as the problems of Ghosts. Yeah,
and I think that's probably why when her next volume does come out, there'll be a lot of scrutiny of that text by scholars, because a lot of us are really interested to see if she has benefited at all from the criticism that she's received. I mean, part of the thing is she's been sort of insulated. She's so unbelievably famous. And obviously, most children who read her comics aren't reading, children's literature periodicals, and so they may be unaware of some of these critiques. But for those of us who study children's literature and comics studies, this will be an interesting time to sort of see what her next text looks like.
Yeah. And, the thing about Raina Telgemeier that I find fascinating is... Okay, so, she's one of the biggest sellers in comics today. However, the vast majority of, I guess, what most people would consider comic book readers, we can call them, let's say, the Wednesday Warriors, right? The people who go and, get their latest bunch of DC, Marvel, and what have you, comic books, haven't read her.
Right.
And don't know who she is, or maybe they've heard her name, but they've never read her stuff. And I find that interesting in that the kind of readers that we usually think of as comic readers, the majority of them aren't familiar with Raina Telgemeier, who is one of the biggest selling creators today.
But I think that actually gets to the root of what I'm writing about in my book, which is that when the big sort of children's lit publishers, the mega corporations that publish children's literature, began to adopt comics and began to solicit authors to come and draw for them, Raina was one of those. And so what you have is you have a group of kids who are being sort of, who are being exposed to what one might call sort of big publishing house sanctioned comics, right, in the form of what would be called graphic novels, very emphatically. And that's really different. And the distribution model is different, too. I mean, Raina's books are sold in bookstores mainly, right. The Scholastic Book Fair. That's how kids are interacting with them at the library. They're very much pushed by the libraries. But then you have, kids going to a comic shop. Now, her graphic novels will be there because, because
they sell.
They sell. And so, you find a lot of that crossover now of Macmillan and other major publishers like Scholastic putting their books into comic shops. But you are going to see, I think, a somewhat different kind of readership coming up. And it's what will be even more interesting to ask is all these kids who are reading Raina Telgemeier and a lot of other sort of hybrid comics like Jeff Kinney and all those, will they then grow up to become comic book readers? And that's a really interesting question that is yet to be answered. But the marketing, what's fascinating, though, is all the marketing that's done for Telgemeier. I mean, I talked to Gina Galiango, who we absolutely love at First Second Book. She's so amazing. We love Gina. But Gina was, I did an interview with Gina for my book, actually, and we were talking about just the mindset that contemporary publishers have had to adopt in order to be competitive in terms of comics. And so they're borrowing a lot from comic book publishers, but I do still feel like you're intimating that there is a bit of a divide between folks who come to comics through comic shops and comic cons and folks who come to them through the library and through Scholastic Book Fair, for instance.
So, they're two different worlds.
And they've melded together to a certain extent for distribution purposes, and also there are crossover folks. So I would say someone like Hope Larson is a perfect example of that, right? She draws,
that's a good point.
She draws her own comics. She had one of the first sort of Raina-like comics well before Raina, and that was Chiggers, right? But she then, also draws tons of stuff for the big two. So, there are ways in which comics creators are moving back and forth between these worlds. The question is, are there fans following them back and forth? And that remains to be seen. So, good point. Okay, boy, did we ever go on a tangent there? Sorry about that, but.
Well, no, I mean, I find that fascinating. Yeah. So I'm glad that you revealed some of the work that you're doing here. Okay, I next go to page 370. Do you have anything before that?
No.
Okay, this is in the humanoid section. And this is a book called Exo, E-X-O. It's written by Jerry Frischen with art by Philippe Scafoni. A hard sci-fi story, and actually this is what fascinated me about this. Usually when there's sci-fi, there's some kind of fantastical element to it. I mean, this is an example of hard science fiction writing, and you don't find this often. But anyway, a hard sci-fi story about the intersection of spatial exploration and earthly invasion. Near future. NASA is confident it finally discovered an exoplanet likely to accommodate life. Located 4 light years from Earth, Darwin 2 creates a lot of questions and is scheduled for imminent exploration by a space probe. At the same very moment, an orbital space station is struck by a missile shot from the moon, killing several astronauts. Coincidence or conspiracy?
Da, da, da.
So, this is from Humanoids. I really enjoy what Humanoids does. Edward and I have discussed several Humanoids texts in the past. Maybe we'll cover this one.
Yeah, it looks like the cover is really fascinating. So, all right. Now I think we both go to the same place.
Yes, page 380.
Yes.
And you alluded to this earlier.
I did. It's an exciting sort of. Lion Forge is putting out an anthology celebrating Puerto Rican culture, history, strength, and pride. It's called Puerto Rico Strong, a comics anthology supporting Puerto Rico disaster relief and recovery. And this is 160 pages in full color. Historical fiction ages 14 and up, written by various writers. The cover is by Naomi Franquise, and all profits will go towards disaster recovery and relief. And we need so much more to be going out to Puerto Rico. So I thought this would be really cool.
Yeah, I agree. This not only looks fascinating, but it's for a very good cause. And, I'm wondering if there's going to be a story in here of Donald Trump throwing rolls of paper towels.
Anyway, it comes out March 14th, 2018. And since apparently our current government cannot seem to help the people of Puerto Rico, those of us who read comics perhaps can help out as well. So I thought it was really exciting how quickly they got this together, by the way. And there's a lot of really cool folks who are working in comics from Puerto Rico. So I can't wait to read this. The cover itself looks just beautiful. And I'm looking forward to reading it.
Something else that looks beautiful that's also in the Lion Forge section, and this is in their Cub House imprint, is on page 384. And this is The Lost Path. This is by, and I'm hoping at least get around the correct pronunciation of the name, Amélie Fléché, AMELIE FLECHAIS. Three young boys set off from Camp Happiness determined to win a treasure hunt, but the shortcut they take leads to something far more spectacular and sinister. All manner of magical beasties live in these woods, and the kids find themselves caught between warring forest spirits. The solicit is interesting, but what really captured my attention when I was looking through the catalog is Fléché's art. Mm-hmm. The cover of The Lost Path looks phenomenal. Yeah,
it's interesting. It's almost like a combination of the Dam Keepers that we were talking about, that Paul and I talked about, with Theo Ellsworth. Remember Theo? We interviewed him, and he has those incredibly intricate designs on his comics. Mm-hmm. And there's sort of like this really cool, very intricate design on the cover of this, and then sort of superimposed on that is what looks like the sort of more realistic drawings inside that will be characterize the comic. But just the cover alone makes me want to read this comic.
Yes, I agree. Okay, I next go to page 391, the NBM section. Do you have anything before then?
No, I went to 391 myself.
In the NBM section?
Uh-huh.
Okay, what interests you there?
The same thing as you, I think, The Initiates.
The Initiates, yeah, by Etienne Davidoux. Mm-hmm. I haven't heard of Davidoux before, but I know that NBM does a lot of works in translation, and in fact, Edward and I have talked about some of their books in past episodes of the Euro Comic series. And so I'm assuming that this is one of them, given the name of the artist. And this seems to be a narrative about artists. So it's an artist's tale. Etienne Davidoux is a comic artist. He doesn't know much about the world of winemaking. Richard Leroy is a winemaker. He rarely even read comics. But these two are full of goodwill and curiosity. Why do they choose to spend one's life writing and creating comics or producing wine? How and for whom do we do them? To answer these questions, for more than a year, Etienne went to work at Richard's vineyards and cellar. Richard, in return, leapt into the world of comics. They opened a lot of bottles and read many comics. They traveled around meeting authors and winemakers, sharing their passion for their jobs. They get to realize they both have that precious and necessary power to bring people together. So I'm guessing that this is not only an artist's narrative to a large degree, or a creator's narrative. Is it autobiographical?
Yeah, it seems like it is. It sounds like maybe he really did this. And that's exciting.
Yeah, it is. Although I'm curious why they didn't mention, at least more forthrightly, that this is autobiographical.
I know. I'm trying to read the subtitle, but it's not coming up very well on my computer. I can't make the screen any bigger, but I think that there's a little subtitle in the cover.
Yeah, it says a comic artist and a wine artisan exchange jobs.
Well, I mean, it feels autobiographical to me. So either way, I mean, it's fascinating. Yeah.
Also solicited on that page in the NBM section is a book from one of my favorite creators, Rick Geary. And this is The True Death of Billy the Kid. Yeah. Rick Geary, he doesn't do only historical stuff, but he does a lot of historically based comics, and apparently this is another one.
Mm-hmm. It looks fascinating.
And we've had him on the show for an interview a couple of times, and he's a really good guy. I'm always on board for about anything he does, and I want to check out The True Death of Billy the Kid.
Cool.
Where do I go next?
I think 292. We both were interested in a comic there.
Okay, yeah. The Nobrow Press. Yeah, why don't you talk about this?
This really looks interesting to me. It's called Dalston Monsterzz, and it's spelled Monsterz, and it's a graphic novel by Dilraj Mann, and he is a Canadian, I think is he Canadian or a British comics creator? But it says, long-awaited graphic novel, all eyes turn to East London, so he's British, where freakish monsters and megalomaniacal property developers are competing to see who can destroy it first. The only thing that stands in the way of the apocalypse: hipsters, hotties, and nerds. It's time to throw down and look sharp as hell while doing so. And I don't know, it just looks like a really interesting topical comic. I'd love to get a hold of this one. So, and this is out of No Brow. And it's interesting because when I probably the reason why I got that confused is when I was in Canada this summer for a conference, I picked up a comic called Towers, which is about immigrants living in high-rise towers in Toronto. And so now I'm thinking this might be an interesting sort of short article writing about the way that high-rises and sort of urbanity in that particular way are depicted in comics. So I'm definitely getting this. It looks absolutely awesome. So
yeah, I'm familiar with that book that you mentioned, Towers, and it's really good. No Brow is a UK publisher. We've even done a publisher spotlight on No Brow. Yeah. They do great stuff, and I'm with you. I want to check this one out.
Well, also, I went to school on the East End. I went to Queen Mary, which at the time was a very sort of, working class neighborhood. There was transport there, but this was the neighborhood where the Olympics ultimately were put on, and there was this huge gentrification that went on in East London over the last 30 years since I lived and worked there. And now when I went back, I didn't even recognize it. I mean, my alma mater, almost every single building that I remember is either gone or has been repurposed, and now there's all these new shiny buildings. So I also have sort of a personal stake in this because I'm pretty aware of this part of London, and so it should be interesting to read this. So, yeah.
Okay, I next go to page 394.
Okay.
I don't know if you have anything before that.
Nope, I do not.
Yeah, this is in the Oni section, and this is issue number 1 of the Ballad of Sang, S-A-N-G. This is written by Ed Brisson with art by Alessandro Miceli. And what really caught my attention is the fact that Ed Brisson is the writer. And I think that if I didn't see Brisson's name attached to this project, I'm not sure if I would have highlighted it like I'm doing now. But I really do like Ed Brisson's work. The solicit reads, kidnapped off of the streets of the Philippines as an infant and trained as a child assassin, Sang has never had a childhood. All he's ever known is killing and the kindness of his master, Chen, the closest thing Sang has to a father. When Sang's enthusiasm botches a job, it brings the wrath of Don Minchella down on the pair, resulting in Chen's murder. Barely escaping with his own life, and with Minchella's severed arm in tow, intriguing, Sang swears revenge, while every gang in the city mobilizes to return him to Minchella, dead or alive.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, and then there's underneath that solicit a brief quote by Brisson. He says that the Ballad of Sang is a story I've been wanting to tell for years, as far back as 2010. So apparently this was a burning desire of Brisson's, and now it's coming out from Oni.
Cool. Yeah, it looks great, doesn't it?
Or soon to be coming out from Oni. I next go... Where do you go next?
We both go, I think, to Spectacle on 398.
Yes.
Yeah, this is by Megan Rose Gedris. And the cover alone would make me want to purchase this comic.
I agree.
It's just beautiful. It's basically pragmatic engineer Anna works as a psychic in the Samson Brothers circus, but she doesn't believe in anything supernatural until her twin sister Kat is murdered and comes back as a very demanding ghost. Sharing a room with her sister was hard, but now that they're sharing a body while trying to identify the killer, it's even harder, I guess. With few leads, a troop full of secretive folk, and strange paranormal occurrences popping up and around the circus, solving the case seems near impossible, but the murderer is in their midst, and maybe the least of their problems. So this just sounds like a complicated, intense comic, and I have to say that the drawing style reminds me a lot of Tony Cliff.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so for me, too, I'm really excited to see this sort of steampunkish, sort of, quasi 19th century looking type comic, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Okay, after that, I don't have anything until the Titan Comics section. Do you have anything before, let's say, page 418?
I do. I want to bring our readers' attention to a public service announcement. One of my favorite comics creators of all time is Erica Moen, and she is just an incredible comics artist who really began and got her fame online as a comics creator in that way. And then about 2 or 3 years ago, she started to do these webcomics called Oh Joy Sex Toy, which and she did them herself, and then apparently she's teamed up with someone called Matthew Nolan to do sort of more. But basically what these are is they're texts that try to deal with sexuality in a mature way, truly mature way, right? And sort of showing, especially I think women, but also men, the various sex toys and sex aids that are out there, and how to use them, how to clean them, how to deal with them in just a really straightforward way. And so they've collected a year's worth, it says, in volume 1 of Oh Joy Sex Toy. And this is, I'm trying to think, is this still, this is still Ani. It's part of their Limerick imprint, right? Yeah, and so I highly recommend this. And also, Erica is funny as all get out, and she's really a talented drawer. So I highly recommend that. So not my usual recommendation, but there you go. And certainly not something I would be dealing with on the Young Readers show. So, yeah, probably not. Okay, anything else before Titan? No. Okay. I didn't mention, or I didn't highlight this in my notes, but on page 416, there's a #1 issue called Factory, and this is by Yassine Elgo El Hore. And I mentioned this just because the art really captured my attention. So, I mean, I think it's worth checking out. But where I wanted to go after that, and this is on page 418, this is Sea of Thieves, #1 of 4. The artist on this is Rollard Marselius, but the writer is Jeremy Whitney, and that's what really captured my attention, because I like the stuff that Jeremy Whitney has done. He does the Princeless series. Oh, yeah, I like that. Yeah. At Action Lab, and we've had him on the show at least a couple of times. So he's the writer of this, and now he's doing something for Titan. So this looks interesting. Yeah, it does. And also the art, the sample art that we get from Marselius is really impressive. Yeah. On page 422 is something else in the Titan section. This is Fighting American, The Ties That Bind, #1. So apparently Titan is taking this classic Golden Age character, Fighting American, which I think we mentioned earlier, that, the Craig Yo book, Super Patriotic Heroes. Fighting American was one that he focuses on. So here we get new Fighting American stories. And then on page 425, we get trade collections of Titan's hard case crime series. We have a trade for Quarry's War. We also have a trade for The Girl Who Handcuffed Houdini. That sounds interesting. Yeah, although this one is listed as Minky Woodcock, The Girl Who Handcuffed Houdini, and I thought that the series was The Girl Who Handcuffed Houdini, not Mindy Woodcock, The Girl Who Handcuffed Houdini. Now, the Quarry's War is in trade paperback, but The Girl Who Handcuffed Houdini is in hardcover, so that's interesting. Do you have anything after that? Well, Derek, there's 2 books that I wanted to finish up with today, both from Toon, which you know is Francois Mouly and Art Spiegelman's wonderful series of texts for young readers. And the first one out of Toon books is called Snails Are Just My Speed. I identify with that. This is by Kevin McCloskey, very well-known author and comics creator. And this is a comic sort of along the lines of science comics, but for a younger readership, all about how snails build their little snail paths and roads and all that sort of stuff. I thought that would be really fun. And then also Toon Graphics has a new series. It's by Jaime Hernandez, and it's the Dragon Slayer Folktales from Latin America, which sounds really interesting. And I'm getting this as soon as I can and maybe teaching it in my classes. So I was really psyched. It's coming out simultaneously in soft cover and hardcover. So just $9.99 for the soft cover. So that makes it something I could teach. So I'm really excited about that. And that was it for me for this month. I think you might have a couple others.
Yeah, I do. But, I want to say that I am glad that you mentioned the Dragon Slayer, because for some reason I completely overlooked that. And, I'm a big fan of the Hernandez brothers. And, I'll get anything that Gilbert and Jaime do. I did not see this.
Yeah, isn't it exciting? So,
yes.
Yeah, I'm really, really, really looking forward to this, and probably will be using it in my class next year.
Yeah, so I'm glad that you brought this up. Yeah, I next go to page 448, and this is in the Vertical Comics section. They do a lot of manga, and this is Volume 1 of City by Keiichi Arare. And, I'm familiar with Arare in the Nichiju series. But this is something new coming out. It says, from the creator of Nichiju comes a new slapstick comedy series about a penniless college student who moves to a town filled with bizarre people. This reckless girl will be the one who eventually sets the city in motion. And then there's more to this solicit. But it does look fascinating, and it's something that maybe Shay and I can discuss on an upcoming manga episode.
Yeah, that sounds like fun.
Mm-hmm. And then the final thing that I have in the January previews catalog that I'd like to mention is in the VIZ Media section, again, manga. And this is Kaguya-sama Love is War. And this is by Akasaka. It says Kaguya Shinomiya and Miyuki Shinogane are two geniuses who stand atop their prestigious academy student council, making them the elite among elites. But it's lonely at the top, and each has fallen for the other. There's just one huge problem standing in the way of lovey-dovey bliss. They're both too prideful to be the first to confess their romantic feelings, and thus become the loser in the competition of love. And so begin their daily schemes to force the other to confess first. This may be an interesting shoujo to read and discuss for our manga series. So I'll have to ask Shay if he's interested in discussing this.
Yeah.
This comes out in the first part of March.
Cool.
Well, Gwen, this has been kind of a long episode because there's so much that you and I wanted to highlight in the January previews catalog.
Absolutely, but there's so many good things. So
many good things. Although I have to say I'm tired now because we've spent so much time going through this catalog. But as you point out, this one is jammed packed with great titles, and it's sure to explode your wallet.
That's right.
Yes. And you can bet that about all of the titles that Gwen and I have just been discussing will be at great discounts at the website of our sponsor, which is Discount Comic Book Service. Remember, go to dcbservice.com. They'll take care of all of your comics pre-ordering needs. Great discounts. You can't beat them.
Absolutely.
That's right. And after you do get your titles there, get in touch with us and let us know what you're going to be reading. If you go to our website, comicsalternative.com, you'll find that you can leave us a voice message online via SpeakPipe. Or you can call us the old-fashioned way by picking up the phone and dialing 4153-COMICS. That's 415-326-6427.
Also, you can reach us by email at twoguys@comicsalternative.com, or you can get in touch with us individually. I'm Gwen at comicsalternative.com. Derek, how can people reach you?
at Derek at comicsalternative.com. You can also find us all over social media, such as on Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Google+, Goodreads, Pinterest, YouTube, and the Slack channel. You can subscribe to the podcast through Apple Podcast. You can stream us on Stitcher. You can also find us on TuneIn, on Spotify, on iHeartRadio, and on Google Play Music. But you can find every single one of our episodes, as well as the reviews and comics-related commentary that we post on our blog, simply by going to our website, which is, again, comicsalternative.com.
Whoa.
Yeah, a lot of ways for people to get in touch with us. There's no excuse not to contact us.
That's right.
That's right. Gwen, it's been fun doing another preview show with you, and I look forward to talking with you again next week.
Absolutely. And everyone have some good comics reading.
That's right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Hey, what happened?